If you've ever been hacked before, one of your first responses was probably, "What the heck? How did this even happen?" There's the obvious type of hacks, like when somebody in Mumbai pretends to work for Microsoft, and so they give you a call and tell you that your computer has viruses that they need to fix for you. Or there's the kind where someone approaches you at the Grand Exchange and says that their dad works for Jagex and can give you one of each party hat if you just provide them with your RuneScape account info. These hacks are pretty obvious. They are social engineering. And oftentimes, the victim will come to the realization of what has happened when they sit back and reflect on the interaction that they had with the hacker. But how would an account just get compromised out of the blue without any interaction with a suspicious person? Usually, this ends up happening because of a poor security practice, which is reusing the same email and password for various accounts on the internet. And if you aren't using a password manager, chances are that you're doing this right now. All of the online services you use which require authentication are storing that username, password, and email in some way, but they do not necessarily store those passwords in a proper way. And if the website were to be hacked, then your email that you use to sign up to the service and the password could be revealed. And if that email just so happens to be the same email that you use for everything else, and that password happens to be the same password used to access that email, and you don't have two-factor authentication enabled, then the hacker would have achieved a keys to the kingdom type of scenario, where every single other account that you have can be hacked by doing email password recovery. And there's a few different ways in which websites store passwords incorrectly. And it's not just obscure anime forums that end up getting this wrong. The Adobe Creative Cloud, for example, was storing passwords wrong a few years ago, and as a result, millions of accounts were compromised. Because, surprise, surprise, storing passwords is actually kind of complicated and pretty easy to mess up. The most obvious fail way of storing a password would be to do so in plain text. When this happens, you basically just have a table with a person's email, their username, and their password all in plain text. So if this were to get hacked, there's not even any cracking that the hacker has to do. They would just have all of your password info in a neat little table like this. And you can actually tell when an online service is storing passwords like this, because if you go to request a password reset or a password recovery, and the administrator is able to email you what your password was, then they are storing passwords in plain text. Whenever someone is storing passwords correctly, it should be impossible for them to just tell you what your password is. Not to mention that this is an obvious security threat from insider attacks. If some type of disgruntled employee wanted to wreak havoc on this site, they just have to open up that database, see what the password of one of the high-level administrators are, and then there goes your forum. And another thing that a lot of websites will do, which is slightly more intelligent when it comes to storing passwords, but still not good enough of a security practice, is that they'll either encrypt the password database or they will store the passwords as a hash in the database. Now, this doesn't work for a few reasons. First is that not all encryption or hashes are created equally. Some hashes are simply weaker than others, like MD5 compared to SHA-2. In fact, MD5 has an issue with collisions. So if you're storing password hashes with MD5, there's actually a chance that someone could log into your account without even using your actual password. They just have to enter some string of text that ends up producing the same hash after the algorithm has been run against it. And considering that things like invalid HTTPS certificates and malicious programs have been generated that match the MD5 of valid certificates and valid programs, this is more than possible to do with a simple password string. And the problem with just encrypting a password database is that behind every set of encryption, there is an encryption key. And if that encryption key is found out, then the entire password database would be decrypted, and then you would have the same issue as plain text. And there's a good chance that this password key would be found out because, again, if anybody's storing passwords in this way, it's clearly a mistake, and they've probably made other security mistakes within the website or service. There's probably other holes that exist, or the administrators aren't really knowledgeable about spear phishing attacks, so chances are they could just end up getting that database key social engineered from them. And like I said, once you've got the key, you just have access to plain text passwords. So when you're signing up to a website, your best bet is to really just assume that they are storing passwords incorrectly. Don't trust that they're doing it in the right way. Or unless they give you an option to sign up with Google or sign up with, well, I was going to say Twitter, even though Twitter just ended up getting hacked. But generally, Google doesn't really get hacked. So if you have a Google account, if that's something that you want to do, then you could just sign up with that. Or if they don't give you that option, the best thing to do would be to use an email address, which is just a throwaway, one that you don't really care about, potentially losing or getting compromised in some way, or at the very least, make sure that the email you're using to sign up for these services has a two-factor authentication enabled. That way, if somebody tries to log into it, they're not able to get in with just the password. They need to also, get a code from your phone or use a YubiKey, something like that. And for the love of God, use a different password for each online service that you're using and store them with a password manager. Because if you don't, you're just going to end up reusing the same password over and over again, or a simple permutation of that password, like adding a number or two to the end of it, which really isn't that much better. And you can also check to see if one of your accounts has already been hacked by visiting haveibeenpwned.com and entering in an email address that you want to check on. And this will return a list of online services where you use that email to sign up that have had a database breach containing your account info. So if this shows up, you know that that particular account has been pwned, hackers have already compromised it. And if you use the same password for another service with the same email, you need to go change it immediately. Otherwise, that service will likely get pwned as well, if it hasn't been already. So I hope you guys found this video useful. If you did, be sure to share it with people who have yet to be hacked, as well as those who have already been hacked if they haven't learned their lesson already. Also be sure to leave a like and subscribe with the notification bell enabled. Bye now.